It's a very stressful time for our communities, our country, and the world. Our overarching goal is to help, give you some strategies, resources, and hope. On this edition of Connected Colorado, we talk to some experts on how to cope with these uncertain times. Some say the coronavirus reminds us, like it or not, that humanity is an interconnected web of life. What happens to one happens to all. Some say they're sick of hearing about coronavirus or the C word. Well, perhaps other C words can help transmute that more challenging one. Caring, community, courage, commitment, compassion, calm, not chaos. A time of coping to help each other. And even if we can't gather, a time now more than ever to connect. Hi, I'm Wendy Brockman. We are doing things differently as times have changed. We are here meeting virtually with a panel of experts on how to cope. Joining me now is Amy Voth-Siepert for the Colorado Department of Emergency Preparedness and Response. Hello, Amy. We also have Carrie Ladd from the Mental Health Center of Denver, Kristen Cochran Ward from the Health District of Northern Larimer County, and Major Mike Dickinson, the Salvation Army Intermountain Divisional Commander. Welcome, all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
Can you, Amy, just start us out of the gate with a little perspective? And you have 5 principles that can kind of set the tone for what we're going to talk about.
Right. So one of the things that is present in disasters, especially around this topic of behavioral health, is a practice called psychological first aid. It's an evidence-informed early intervention for disasters. And it really shows that we can reduce our stress and increase our functioning when we do things that help promote 5 big things. When we promote our sense of safety, calm, connectedness, effectiveness or sense of control, and hope, that all helps us bring down our sense of stress and increase our sense of functioning, even in disrupted states.
All right. Now, fear is dangerous in and of itself, right? So we're seeing people panicking. How important is it to deal with fear from an emotional health point of view, Carrie?
So I think when we're dealing with fear and anytime we're in a point of crisis, we really have to think about validation. What part of our response makes sense given the stimulus, and what part might be our mind playing some tricks on us? So for example, we kind of look at the panic buying of some of the goods that people might not need in the moment. But I think getting back to Amy's point about a sense of control in a situation that's has a lot of unrest, we go to those things. So I think acknowledging the parts that are really scary and validating that experience for us, what it does is it can decrease the intensity of the emotion that's tied to it, so that we can kind of move into the parts of our brain that aren't fear-based, that allow us to do some problem solving. And I think that's where we can really start to feel effective.
And it's important to point out, Kristen, maybe you can answer this, that the fear doesn't necessarily equal reality.
Right. I think that's a really, really good point. While it's completely normal and common for so many people to have heightened anxiety, that what we're hearing and what we're seeing from a lot of people is this very unrealistic view of what they think is going to happen, or blown kind of out of proportion of catastrophizing. You know, that's one of the things that we often talk about in the behavioral health world, is these thought distortions we have that often result in this additional anxiety and stress. So when we're bombarded with all of this information and all of the things that we're seeing in the media, and you don't know as an individual how to shift through what's reality and what's not reality, then it is this heightened sense of fear, this heightened sense of anxiety. And how do you really know what's fact and what's not? So that's leading, I think, to a lot of the problems that people are having.
Well, and the Salvation Army is there for people in times of crisis with food or shelter, basic necessities. What kinds of reactions are you seeing? Are they positive?
Yeah, we're really seeing the whole gamut, but I would say that by and large, people that are calling the Salvation Army, and I think there's two kinds of people at this moment. There are folks that are calling the Salvation Army because they have means and they want to help and support and make donations, and that's a wonderful thing, and we're grateful for them. And then there's people that are living paycheck to paycheck and that are very fearful. How are they going to deal with their kids being homeschooled and not having a paycheck, or they lost their second or third job? And what we want those people to know is that they can call one phone number from the 4 states that we serve here in the Intermountain region, and we will be able to tell them their closest Salvation Army so that they could go and pick up a food box if they're in need. If they need help with rent or utility assistance, we will be able to, on that same phone call, be able to talk to them virtually. And then we're offering emotional and spiritual care. So there may just be people that need somebody to pray with them, to talk to them because they're isolated.
Amy, you were deployed to respond to the Ebola virus in Sierra Leone in 2015. Do you see any comparisons?
We saw a lot of positive things happen when it wasn't just like there's this response group and there's the community members. We really saw the community members as a fundamental part of helping the public health response along. So I think that's powerful, to really recognize that when we follow Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' recommendation to look for the helpers, we're really looking at everybody in our community during a public health event, because all of our behaviors really make a difference in being able to flatten the curve, if you've heard that before, or just reduce the impact of that on our community.
So I just wanted to really take a moment to acknowledge what we are seeing right now, because I think, just like Mike was talking about, that there definitely is this sense of calm before the storm. When you look at, from a behavioral health perspective, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's really the foundational level that we're at right now. People are concerned about their housing. People are concerned about their employment. People are concerned about safety and health. So that's where everybody's focusing, or I should say the majority of the population is focusing. I really think we're in this like calm kind of survival mode, just getting through day to day. And I think what we would need to talk about from a behavioral health perspective is what's going to happen when this storm kind of settles. It's like a tornado, you shelter in place, you go to your basement, and then you come up and you see the damage of everything that's happened. And that's when I think this is really going to hit people from a behavioral health standpoint, where we're going to see, more depression, more isolation, the financial crisis that people are having. It's not going to be surprising if we see an increase in people with suicidal thoughts or even completed suicides as a result of what is happening now. So I think as clinicians and as a community, that's where we really need to be very focused on planning of how are we going to deal with the impacts of this on a long-term basis. I can only speak for my agency. At this point in time, we've seen numbers drop of people calling for service. We've seen numbers drop of people actually accessing services. So many people are focused on, how am I going to survive today? How am I going to pay my electric bill when I just got laid off from my job? How am I going to pay my rent? That I don't have the finances to think about mental health treatment. But yet when all of this settles, what is that going to do? When people are living in isolation as well, if they're quarantined or if they're given a shelter in place order, then what's happening in the home environment for people? Is there more conflict at home? Is there going to be more marital problems? Parents dealing with children that they're not normally used to having to homeschool, an increase in substance use. So a lot of those things I think are coming, and we as providers need to be prepared how to deal with that.
And Carrie, what's so interesting is self-isolation and things shutting down. I mean, none of us have ever seen anything like this. So I don't know, what is that doing to us emotionally?
So I think that's a great question, because we are such a herd species. We really get fed, whether we're an introvert or an extrovert, from the relationships that we have. One of the strengths we always look at here at the Walk-In Center, and I think in mental health in general, is who is your support system? And so being cut off from that support system physically has I think created this need to get creative. I think that what I've seen is a lot of people stepping up to the task. I've been encouraging folks and trying to use this advice myself of being mindful, picking 3 people a day to reach out to, whether that's over the phone, whether that's on the internet, whether that is very old fashioned and writing a good old letter, talking with neighbors, maintaining social distancing in our backyard over the fence, but connecting, saying hello if I am out for a walk. Again, kind of keeping in mind that the social distancing, but really trying to make eye contact and give a smile and a nod to the people that I'm passing as I'm walking in my neighborhood, to really foster that sense of we are in this together. We are sharing this experience. And that's a big deal. Shared experience is, again, something we really look for in mental health treatment. It's why groups are often so effective in mental health treatment, is because when you are able to foster that with folks, again, it just decreases the intensity of the emotion, helps us have, kind of getting to Amy's point about hope for the future and feeling like we can have a positive impact.
There's so many ways to do that. You can sing, you can dance, like you said, you can smile, you can do photography, you can write. So many things that'll give you a little more normalcy in your life.
And I have to look at it from a very optimistic standpoint of how is what's happening now changing our behaviors, changing our daily routines, our structure, our habits. And what good can we take from this and then continue even when this ends? So when you look at right now your Facebook feeds or your Instagram or even the newspapers, there's so much of a call for a sense of humanity, helping your neighbor, helping those who are less fortunate, helping the elderly, sending cards to nursing homes. How can we still take some of that and say, this is really, really good stuff? And part of, I think, people who are really successful in dealing with crisis is that ability to look outside of their situation and help somebody else. So if we can continue to really foster that, I think we're going to be way better off as a community, as a society, than we even were a month ago. So how do we take these positive things and say, let's continue making them happen?
Amy, you talked about connectivity. And thankfully, our technology has served us wonderfully during this. Even, we're communicating with Zoom, and a lot of people are using that to do meetings, but they're also using it socially to have block parties, game nights, things like that. And that's what you're talking about with connectivity, right?
Absolutely. My 7-year-old nephew and 3-year-old niece invited all of our family to a virtual tea party the other day. It was bring your own tea, but everybody was there on, I think it was Skype for us, just talking to one another and saying, like, how did you spend your day? How is your routine felt like? And I so appreciate the innovation that I see. And I really would echo what Kristen says, that if we can take these creative, innovative ways we're making things work in a disrupted time and have those options, have those new ways of being in community together when all of this either passes or we go through sort of those waves of it ebbs and flows. Just having more options, I think, makes us more resilient and makes us better able to sort of think outside of the way that fear sort of makes us narrow and focus on a specific threat.
Major Mike, one thing we've done in our household is to try to flip it the way we view it. Instead of saying we have to stay home, we get to stay home. We get this opportunity to be together as a family, and we get to be somewhere where we're safe.
What we want people to do is not to focus on the fear, but to focus on the hope. What blessings have come your way today? I think Amy mentioned a virtual tea party. What an opportunity that is, right? So we're encouraging people that call to be focused upon those things. What are the good things taking place in your life? I have a home to be in. I have heat. I have food. And while I may not be sure about tomorrow, today I'm okay. And so it is flipping the narrative in our mind and how we connect with one another. And I think that's a wonderful thing, knowing that we're made for community. One of the challenges that we have, and maybe others will speak to this more, is for those senior citizens that are challenged with the technology piece. And so I'm not sure if I've mentioned, but we've called all of our retired pastors, our retired Salvation Army officers back into duty. And so if somebody calls our number and says, I just need somebody to talk to, we're going to get their information to one of our retired senior citizen pastors, and they'll make a call to just say, hey, I want to check in on you. How are you doing today? To pray with them, talk to them, whatever the issue might be. That's how we need to be in this community. And one of my hopes is that we're going to come through this as a changed America, hopefully a changed world. We're so fast-paced, we don't know our neighbors, and maybe through this, we can come back to some basic human elements that we were created by God to live in community, to love and encourage one another. And if what comes out of this is that, I think as a people, we're going to be okay.
But I do want to add something, because again, since this conversation is specifically focused around behavioral health, as much as we do have this sense of united community and hope and moving forward, I really do think it's important to acknowledge the people that suffer with significant mental health issues already, and the impact that this is having on them. People who have really significant mental health issues that may have been in treatment, they may have lost their providers. They may have lost the one person, that one human connection that they have that's been a support to them. And now they might have to get those services through telehealth, which is a phenomenal means for providing care. But I think it's important that we talked about this earlier, that we normalize people who already are struggling with mental health issues might have an increase in their symptoms, might have an increase in some of the struggles that they're having, and that's okay. It doesn't mean they're failing. It doesn't mean that they've completely relapsed in their treatment. It doesn't mean that it's not going to get better for them again. But I just think it's important that we acknowledge that we see you, even though we may not be face to face. We know concerns, and there is still help available for you, even though it might look a little bit different. So I just didn't want to go much further without acknowledging that there are people who are having a more difficult time embracing that sense of hope for the future and are really struggling, and that we're still here for you.
Suicide rates are already high in Colorado, and stress does not help in those situations. Amy?
I was just to add to what Kristen was saying, I absolutely agree. I think that we have to acknowledge that though there are things to be grateful for, people are still living life, and there are losses, and there are sorrows that are happening at the same time that all of this is happening. I know that I'm aware of people who have maybe had a family member die, not due to the disease, but just because it was that time in their life. So one of the things that we really recognize as critical during disasters is to maintain some sense of not just routine, but also ritual.
Well, it's so true when you look at children. I have teenagers, and, this is the time of year when you get to go to prom. They have sports activities. They're looking ahead to graduation. And all of that has now been erased. They don't get that to be a part of their life anymore. So, Carrie, what does that do to them?
Yeah, I think Amy's point about a sense of loss and recognizing the grief that is within this whole pandemic that is happening is valuable and important. I think people need to be seen and heard and understood during this time. I think for a lot of our kids, kind of depending on their age range, having honest conversations about what's happening that are developmentally appropriate. So a conversation I would have with my 2-year-old about why he can't see his friends at daycare is very different than a conversation you would have with your kids about going to prom. I think that kids are really good at knowing when we are not being straightforward and honest with them. I really like to use dialectical thinking, or both and, where we can acknowledge that this very real thing is happening and find our sense of hope. So I think, to take, Wendy, your example of we get to spend time together. What a privilege. And it is really awful that part of that cost is losing your graduation, losing these milestones. Going back to that touchstone of validation, honesty, empowerment too. I think that our kids We are all feeling vulnerable as adults, and we have a lot of autonomy and ability to impact change. Our kids might not have that same sense of autonomy. And so allowing them an opportunity to make choice. Do you want to do reading or do you want to do math? Would you like to do culinary arts or PE? Kind of contained choice, giving them a sense of empowerment when things feel very powerless right now.
That stress impacts our immune system, which is exactly the thing that we want to protect right now. So, Carrie, I know one of your principles, Amy, was calm. I'm seeing a lot of exercise online. You can do some yoga online, things like that to help your stress and help you to stay calm. And is that something you've seen as well?
Absolutely. I think that the mind-body connection is so important, and really taking care of our bodies at this time. We carry a lot of stress in our bodies. Our brain, I often will talk with people about kind of the comparison in size between our brain and our body is so much larger that our brain sometimes does a really good job of outsourcing. And so taking care of our bodies by grounding, by walking, by following our breath, even if it's just when we inhale, if we can sort of take a moment to trace our breath all the way down into the bottom of our belly and then watch it come out, it just takes a different part of our brain to do that kind of mindfulness work that is separate from our limbic system, which is activated more when we have such stress and trauma and uncertainty that we're experiencing right now. Another very easy intervention that I often encourage folks to use is check in with your 5 senses, doing normal everyday activities. When you're brushing your teeth, just check in with each of those senses. Again, it just activates a different part of our brain that slows us down and that allows us to really reconnect to our bodies. And I did want to add also, as far as kind of resources in Denver, I am a clinician at the Denver Walk-In Crisis Center. We are open. We are offering, with precautions, face-to-face services. We will hope to be utilizing some telehealth resources in the very near future. And so the Colorado Crisis Services line is the 1-844-493-TALK, is a fantastic resource to help connect you for behavioral health treatment. Like Amy was saying, you can speak with a trained crisis clinician on the phone. They'll also help you look at resources that are available in your community. And that line as well is accessible for folks with a variety of languages. The walk-in centers are open. There are several of them throughout definitely the Denver metro area. And Colorado Crisis Services can help you connect to those that are open throughout the state.
Well, whether it's long-term or short-term, I'd like to hear some closing thoughts from you guys. Amy, I'll start with you.
So one of the things to just follow on to what Carrie was sharing is that our body, our brains are accustomed to sort of dealing with stress on a short-term basis. And if you think about that fear, that stress as a kind of energy, what it's doing is trying to bring our physical energy, our mental energy together to do something about the threat that our brain has recognized. And this threat of COVID-19 is one of those things that's a little bit tough because, as we talked about before, it's invisible. So it's a little bit harder to see, but we do have actions that we can take to address it better. But in thinking about that energy, it's really hard to keep a high level of energy for a long time. So we need to find ways that we can either use that stress energy to do something effective, like maybe clean the surfaces that get touched a lot so that we're removing any sort of part of the virus that might have landed there recently. So we use that energy to do something effective about the threat. Or if we are sort of hearing all of this information about COVID-19 and we get all of this energy stirred up, but we don't have a way to discharge that, a release valve specifically related to what needs to happen for the disease itself, then we need another way to discharge it. So we've heard some wonderful sort of grounding techniques, ideas about doing exercise. Think about other ways to release energy, whether that's singing or finding something to laugh about, or, taking a time to just shake it off. Whatever it is, we need to sort of let that stress energy go and then recharge ourselves for the next time. Since public health events can last for longer than other types of emergencies, we need to get really good at practicing that cycle of using, recharging, discharging the energy so that we're ready to go throughout our various days.
And Major Mike, maybe rely a little bit more on religion and spirituality.
Yeah, so let me first say I fully agree with everything that's been said, and to the mental health issues and to the colleagues that are on this call. This absolutely rely upon those people that you can talk to, and I thank you for your profession and for what you do. And I would say that there's a place for faith and a connection to the Lord. We are spiritual beings. God has proven his faithfulness. He's faithful to his promises. He's faithful to his word. And so I would encourage people to reach out, to call somebody. Absolutely agree with that. 1 Peter 3:8, chapter 3, verse 8 says this, all of you be like-minded. And I think we are. I think we're all like-minded. We're just trying to figure out how to get through this time in history. And then the word of God says, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. And if we will do those things and rely upon our faith and reach out to those who can help us, we are going to get through this. We are people of faith. We are people of hope, and we are here for you. Give us a call and we can walk through this together.
Kristen, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think I just want to piggyback on a couple of other things that have already been said. We touched on the importance of structure for children. I really want to touch on the importance of structure for adults too. So many of our lives have been turned upside down, where we're working from home, or maybe our structure and routines are very different. Try to put that in place for yourself too. If you are working from home now, get up at the same time in the morning, go to bed at the same time.
Make your bed.
Yes, exactly. Try to eat healthy meals, try to allow yourself or give yourself permission to take care of yourself during this time as well. And I think my parting thought would be that we're all dealing with something that none of us have ever experienced before. So don't judge yourself. Don't judge your reactions. Be kind and have compassion for what you're experiencing. We're all having very, very normal reactions to a very abnormal situation. So we have to allow ourselves to have some just compassion for what we're feeling and what we're experiencing, and knowing that together, we're all in this together. We're all experiencing this, and we will survive it. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and say, I'm having a really, really hard time, and I just need to talk to somebody about this. That's okay. And the more that we can do that, and the more we can give ourselves permission to admit that we're struggling, then the more likely we are to get through it.
It's a lot easier to not be okay as long as I'm not alone.
Yeah,
Yes,
for sure.
exactly. So Carrie, maybe take it one day at a time.
Absolutely. I think one day at a time, knowing what you can do to influence change or impact routine in your own life, and differentiating that between sort of cycling on the things that are out of our control or out of our ability to manage because of maybe resources or knowledge, or it's just for other agencies to manage. And I think I would really encourage folks to honor mental health as a part of our health. It's important, and mental health doesn't mean that you're struggling. Mental health is just how your brain is functioning. And so that can be fantastic and terrible and all of the ways in between. And to honor that part of us, like everyone has been saying, reach out for help. Know that there are mental health professionals. We are still working. We are still accessible. It might look a little different than what we're traditionally used to. And we're still available, reaching out to friends, sharing wins and challenges is a way that we connect as well to create that community experience that I think we're all craving a little bit right now.
Major Mike, Kristen, Carrie, and Amy, I want to thank you guys so much for being here. The message that I've received the strongest is it's okay to ask for help. It's not only okay, but it's critically important, and it could be a real gift to you, your family, and others. So thank you guys for being here. And for those of you at home, I'm Wendy Brockman. We want you to stay safe, happy, and well. It is a very stressful time for our communities, our country, and our world. We want to help you cope. We're going to offer strategies, resources, and help. Watch Connected Colorado. A panel of experts will show us how to face these uncertain times.